this week of August 17th, 2026, I'm doing a series reviewing yoga poses and the anatomy behind them and the cues that you can use, coming from a place of really understanding what is the anatomy, what are the joint actions, what are the muscles creating those actions. Because when you have that foundation of knowledge and you can apply it to movement through the cues, through the sequence, you are teaching at a whole other level. You're helping people at a whole other level. That is a powerful transformation that yoga teachers have when they learn the fundamentals of anatomy, which, by the way, I teach in my program, which is linked in my bio. So today we're going to go over chair pose, and this was a question submitted by one of the yoga teachers I'm connected to here on this app. So thank you for that suggestion. Chair has a particular aspect that is really commonly seen when we teach this pose that's known as a muscle compensation. So I want to first go over some of the basics of the posture, and then I'm going to talk about that particular misalignment you're probably going to see. But instead of just thinking of it as a misalignment, I'm going to share with you some of the anatomy behind why you're seeing that happen so often. So when you look at chair as a posture, okay, when you look at chair, let me face front. When you look at chair as a posture, let's first look at what are the anatomical movements, because that's the first place you need to start when you're looking at any pose in terms of understanding how does this pose work. So the first thing is, what is the position of the shoulders? The shoulders are in bilateral flexion. Then we look at the spine. What's the position of the spine? Well, the spine is in mild flexion because the hips are in flexion, but not so much that you're falling forward. In a way, you could say the spine is still long and straight, but there is a bit of flexion happening just simply because of the position of the pose. But really, the spine itself is in a lengthened or straight position. However, what's happening with pelvic positioning? And this is really important to understand. And to understand it, you need to understand the different ways the pelvis moves, which we don't have time to go over today. But in this pose, the pelvis is anteriorly tipped. And so you can see when I stand up straight, the pelvis is level or neutral. Here it's anteriorly tipped. And when the pelvis anteriorly tips, what happens to the tailbone? The tailbone hyperextends, but not so much that it sticks out. It's just a natural sort of mild hyperextension. I wouldn't even call it hyperextension. It's just a bit of extension that's connected to the fact that the pelvis is anteriorly tipping. So as the pelvis anteriorly tips, of course the sacrum is going to stick out a little bit, but not so much that it looks like hyperextension. If we look at the hips are in adduction, the knees are in flexion, ankles are in dorsiflexion. So those are the basics when it comes to the anatomical movements, the joint movements of the pose. So we don't have time to go over the whole thing, but let's just look specifically at one of the compensations that are going to happen. If you're teaching your students chair and you commonly see this, now you have a better idea just based on what I just described as to what's happening. You have a student who, as they come into the pose and bring their shoulders into flexion, what happens? The chin goes up, so the neck goes into extension, and what happens with the tailbone? The tailbone is hyperextended. Now, why might that be happening? Well, compensation is always a tell. It's always a sign that the student intellectually knows what you want them to do, but there's something with range of motion, the action of the muscles on a particular joint that's preventing them from doing it in a way that's generally in alignment. And I think we'd all agree that this is not what we want to see. But why does it happen when the shoulders move into flexion, i.e. when the arms go up? Well, it happens because one of the muscles that resists shoulder flexion is the latissimus dorsi. It's the muscle of shoulder extension. The lats start in the lumbar spine in the thoracolumbar fascia area, and they run up to the humerus, to one small spot on the humerus. And so when you have students come into chair and they take their shoulders into flexion, if their lats are tight, they need to compensate in some way. And so what typically happens is the lumbar spine goes into this sort of sway back or lordotic curve. And when that happens, because the body is a kinetic chain, with that lordotic spine, what happens to the tailbone? It hyperextends. So the adjustment for that is to simply have them bring their hands to their heart. When they bring their hands to their heart or their arms out here, now you can take the misalignment in the pelvis and ask them to pull the belly button in and correct the position of the pelvis. I wouldn't necessarily ask them to tuck their tail, even though technically when you want to take somebody from a hyperextended tailbone into a corrective position, you are having them slightly tuck. Tuck is such a strong word, they'll tend to overdo it and they'll end up with a posterior tip, and you don't want that. So you can just basically speak to the rectus abdominis, which starts on the pubic bone and runs up to the sternum, and just ask them here, bring your hands out in front or bring your hands to the heart, and then pull your belly button in slightly. Lift the front edge of your pelvis. So now you're speaking to the anterior line. You're not speaking to the posterior line, i.e. tuck your tail. And that will have a more mild adjustment and will get them into the right position. So I hope this was helpful. If you have a pose you'd like me to review, just post it in the comments.